Welcome back, friends, and I want to let you know what's going on M Go Blue Podcast. Last week's Conquering Heroes. That's the last one for the summer, unless we have breaking Michigan athletic news or NCAA's news, which we know can happen at any moment. So make sure you stay tuned. Last week's guest, the new field hockey coach here at the University of Michigan, Christy Gannon-Fisher. It was a great conversation. I'm glad that she is now at the helm of the field hockey program. Defend the Block already out this week. Head coach Dusty May. And on Thursday, we've got a new addition there. On Thursday, the newly signed Yaxel Lendenborg. Excited that he pulled his name out of the NBA draft. He is going to be here at the University of Michigan to complete his college career. Beneficiary, Michigan, and Yaxel as well. So, hey, how's it going, Mr. Bush? I want to bring you in here because you had that conversation with Dusty May and with Yaxel. How excited is Dusty?
He's fired up. This was, as Mike Boynton Jr. called it on Defend the Block a few weeks back, a calculated risk. He and the staff, led by Dusty, felt like the roster was good enough to contend in the Big Ten without Yaxel Lendenborg. But with Yaxel, expectations are sky high. Michigan's pretty much everywhere in the top 10 of way too early basketball, top 25s. And yeah, there's room for optimism on all of college basketball's biggest prizes with this team and this roster, which is exciting. So we won't do Defend the Block every Thursday moving forward, but with the transition from No Conquering Heroes, we figured we spice it up a little bit with the big news of Yaxel and obviously about a 30-minute conversation with Dusty May. So encourage folks to check that out.
Yeah, it is the off season, but it's never the off season. I mentioned Conquering Heroes is on a summer hiatus unless we ever get a resolution on the House settlement, whatever that looks like, whatever parameters there are going to be there, because it'll affect the entirety of college sports. But especially as we continue to talk about college football, are there going to be, are they in fact going to have 105 roster limit? Are there going to be those scholarships available? What does the revenue share look like? How does that affect football, basketball, and all other sports? So hopefully at some point this summer, I have no idea. It was supposed to be settled, about 2 months ago? I think it was the beginning of April 6 or 7. And now we are at the beginning of June with still more questions than answers.
Billable hours, always the winner.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. All right, let's talk real football. Let's talk 7 from 77 here. This week on In the Trenches, presented by Meijer. Another programming note for you looking ahead to next week. John has an outstanding conversation with Steve Casula next week. It's a standalone interview episode. It's great. We learned since the last time we did one of these 7 from 77s that Casula is now a co-offensive coordinator on this coaching staff after he was the interim OC in the ReliaQuest Bowl win over Alabama. Your thoughts on Casula, this new elevated role, and maybe a little bit of a tease on next week's episode, a real good one.
So one of the things that I love about what Jim Harbaugh did, and now we're seeing with Sharon Moore, is coaching your coaches and developing your coaches. Steve Casula had that opportunity in the bowl game, and part of that conversation goes from, coming back to the University of Michigan, being tight ends coach, being elevated to, interim offensive coordinator. Well, what was it like developing game plans, calling plays during the bowl game? And I think he aced that test. And so we want to keep as many coaches, good coaches as possible. So he was eventually elevated to co-OC, got a little pay bump. And what that does, it makes it harder if he were to leave, it would have to be, or be interviewed, would have to be for a step up, which would be OC or, head coach somewhere else. I don't know that he's there yet. I don't know that he believes he would be there yet. Not going to turn down a lot of great opportunities, but it does allow him to, it does allow Michigan to retain him and his services. It's a recognition of a great job. And what he's doing in that tight end room. We cover all of that throughout the course of that interview, and excited for our listeners to get a chance to hear his take on the bowl game, spring ball, the tight end room. It's a loaded tight end room. I think the two spots on this team that are most loaded, one on offense, one on defense, is the linebackers for defense with Jay Sean Barham, Jimmy Rolder, Ernie Hausman, and some other guys that are going to be able to step up and play. That's going to be talked about all season. And we've talked about it a little bit this offseason. And on offense, it's that tight end room. It is absolutely loaded. We saw what Hogan Hansen did last week. I'm not going to spoil the rest of the interview because Coach Casula is going to go through the majority of that tight end roster and talk about where those guys are, his expectations for a Max Bredesen, as well as Hogan Hansen going into his second year. And I'll just give you a little teaser about Hogan Hansen. I thought this was a great take because I experienced this as a player as well. You play as a freshman, and a lot of the mistakes are, oh, well, he's a freshman. And then everything you do good, it's, hey, it's all celebrated. Then all of a sudden you become a sophomore. You're not allowed those mistakes anymore. They're much more crucial and critical, and the coaches are going to critique those a little bit more. Not that they weren't at that time, but there's expectations for a freshman, and then once you're done with that freshman season, the expectations are, hey, you're going to be a Colston Loveland contributor. That's the bar.
It's pretty interesting you have that high of praise for the tight end room, not because of the talent there, but because Michigan loses a top 10 pick in Colston Loveland from that room. Yet, would you put tight end as more loaded than the running back room in your eyes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you lose a guy to the transfer portal out of the running back, whether or not you thought he was going to be a major contributor, you lose a little bit of that depth. When you look at the tight end room, Marlon Klein as a senior, Hogan Hansen as just a sophomore, Zach Marshall, Brady Priestcorn. You go right down the list of all of those guys that are developing or have developed enough to be contributors and trying to fight for reps on the field. It's as deep a position and talented as a position as this team has.
And really, it's the two position groups that Max Bredesen touches, running back and tight end. So the overlap there is pretty exciting too. There's a lot of potential there for Steve Casula as co-offensive coordinator. Number 2 on our 7 from 77. We learned some kickoff times for 2025 last week. John Jansen, I know you are fired up for back-to-back games under the lights to start the season, right?
Yeah, I know. It's hey, false enthusiasm is at least enthusiasm. I will try and falsify as much of that as I can for waiting all day long to take on the New Mexico Lobos.
I will say there have been several football-related politician initiatives down in the state of Ohio here over the last, 8 months or so. The latest is trying to avoid noon games. Would you like to petition on all Michigan games being at noon? There feels like there could be a Michigan-Ohio truce there that I think would benefit you quite well.
Yeah, they could have all the night games. We'll take all the noon games. That would be great. I don't have a lot of faith in any of the legislatures to do anything productive. Not that this would be very productive. They got better things to be doing with their time, but I would put that out there right now. State of Michigan, let's petition, because I know the part of it. It's not just Michigan. Michigan State had 7 or 8 night games last year. And that they weren't a huge fan of that. 1 or 2, okay, I get it, right? You're playing in prime time. Who's waiting all day to watch Michigan and New Mexico? It's just not a huge draw. I get Michigan is, but that game should be a noon game, and then use that night game on something with a little more pizzazz.
More on that in a moment, because the reality is the options aren't all that plentiful early on in the season. The one other unique aspect that I saw, Michigan's homecoming game is October 4th against Wisconsin. As we learn more and more about these TV deals, in the past, a home team had full right to establish the start time for a homecoming game, which for Michigan traditionally has been at noon. I was a bit intrigued by the fact that one is a noon or 3:30, may have been a concession there by Michigan to say, hey, we're not playing it at night, but we're at least willing to be flexible noon or 3:30 to keep it during sunlight on that October 4th date.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that will be determined by the status of both programs at that point. And I think Michigan at that point at worst should be 3-1, possibly 4-0. Wisconsin, Luke Fickell, the air raid offense, still, trying to figure out what's going on, on the other side of Lake Michigan there. So it'll be interesting to see what that game ends up being. Noon or 3:30, still better than 7:30 or 8. I'll take it.
Number 3 on our 7 from 77, talking about the lack thereof in terms of real marquee games that the Big Ten possesses, right? It's not just Big Ten games. Week 2, Michigan at Oklahoma is not a game that the Big Ten TV rights possess, but it does seem like weeks 1 through 3, where everything's established, they set the times well in advance, it's lacking in intrigue. Week 1, the marquee games, right? Fox at noon, CBS at 3:30, NBC at 7:30. Obviously, you got the big noon game, Texas, Ohio State on Fox. That's the biggest of the bunch that the Big Ten possesses, like Michigan, Texas last year was the biggest of those early season games. Then it's Nevada, Penn State, and New Mexico, Michigan to round out. It's the brands of Michigan and Penn State there. Week 2, big noon is Iowa, Iowa State on Fox. That's not even a Big Ten game. That was a slide in because Fox has some rights to the Big 12 as well. Rest of the week 2, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Boston College, Michigan State. Power conference teams, but Oklahoma State had a terrible year last year. BC wasn't amazing. And then week 3.
Michigan State tough.
Sure. No, I it's an intriguing game. That will be I think that could be a down to the wire game, but it doesn't give you the juice of, oh, hey, here we go, Saturday night under the lights. Yeah. Then week 3, you're still getting into some Big Ten games here, but it's big noon, Oregon, Northwestern. CBS is USC, Purdue, and NBC opted into a Notre Dame game at 7:30. There is no Big Ten 7:30 game week 3. It is a little bit surprising, and I do hope, as we'll talk some playoff stuff here momentarily, because that modeling discussion has stayed in the news. Boy, I hope that if we are adding some more games to the playoff, we can get a little bit more oomph to weeks 1 through 3, especially with these TV networks paying a lot of money for this.
Yeah, and we'll talk more college football playoffs as we go here, but that's all going to play a part of this, and how this all sorts itself out. How it sounds like they're going to 16 games again. We'll talk about that just down the road in a few minutes. But yeah, if you're going to be paying or expecting these networks to continue to pay record sums of money and get viewership, then you got to start creating better matchups in those first 3 weeks. And there's a couple of different ways they can do it, right? It's scheduling better opponents, or it may be shuffling the schedule a little bit. And this is where I'm curious as to how much pull the networks are going to have on scheduling moving forward. Do you move a premier Big Ten matchup into one of those first 3 weeks, and then in week 5 or in week 8, are you playing a non-conference game at that time? Because the college football schedule, whether it's SEC, Big 12, ACC, maybe it's a Mountain West game. The Pac-12 is growing yet again, even though it seems to still be weird. There's going to be more for them to pull from in terms of matchup. So I think that is one likely road that they may go, but they're going to have to get the Big Ten teams to agree to play some of those, premier matchups before they play some of those non-conference games.
No doubt. Number 4, along these lines, last week, a ton of news and reporting came out from the SEC spring meetings. One of the topics was a potential Big Ten SEC scheduling agreement, or at the very least, more frequent games between the two leagues. An actual agreement would almost certainly force a Michigan to never play anybody else outside of the SEC in non-conference, because you need to make sure you're guaranteed 7 home games, right? Or at least an average. Michigan toggles back and forth 6 and 8 here. Michigan's never going to go to 6 and not have an 8 on the back end. So as there are potential issues with Notre Dame, USC continuing beyond this year, Florida State, Florida, Georgia Tech, Georgia, other rivalries that would be on the chopping block. Obviously, that's why, in some part, just looking at the logistics of it, why Michigan and Notre Dame don't play every year is because teams don't schedule 2 big-time matchups. Are you in favor of this type of an alliance, knowing that that's the potential ramification?
So, yes, I am. Because chances are, and it'll be a rotating thing, it's not always going to be Michigan, Alabama, Michigan, LSU.
You don't want to see Michigan, Florida again?
I would love to see Michigan, Florida, but it's going to be a rotating basis. And in another 8 years, it will seem like Michigan, Florida is due. Doesn't feel like it's due right now because there was a number of matchups over the past, 7 years where, Michigan seemed to be playing Florida all the time. But I do like this because, and let's just be honest, all the premier teams are in the Big Ten and the SEC. And I know, yes, you're going to have one or two teams in the Big 12. I'm sorry, odd man out. And the ACC, Clemson, sorry, odd man out. And no one cares about Notre Dame unless you are a Golden Domer. So if you want to be a part of these matchups, then get in a conference. And let's just keep this conference expansion going. I do like the fact, and now this would require, and again, I'm gonna steal from one of the future questions. This would require the SEC to go to 9 conference games. So then you get to the end of the year and it's apples to apples when you're comparing teams that should or shouldn't be in the college football playoffs. But if the Big Ten is going to go into this agreement, then it is an opportunity for them to force the SEC to play 9 conference games. And I think this would be great. I think it would be great for viewership. It would be great for matchups. Can you imagine us getting a chance to go down to, Death Valley?
LSU is the one that you can sell me on this agreement if the first matchup is Michigan LSU.
That, or I mean, we've never been to Tuscaloosa. I'd love to go to Tuscaloosa, but I know Michigan, Alabama. Okay, it's kind of been in Michigan, Florida. Right? We played a couple of times in the last calendar year. So, but there's a lot of really great matchups, and it would be good for Ann Arbor. It would be good for all of these different towns to have those type of matchups, as well as the broadcast rights. So, broadcast teams and companies get what they're looking for, and the college football fans in these two conferences are getting what they're looking for as well.
More on that, because there is a broader concern potentially to setting up these big non-conference games if there are structured bids for leagues that go beyond the conference champion. But first, John, we have a way for fans to support our good friend from Conquering Heroes, Kevin Connery, Michigan men's lacrosse head coach, and his program coming up.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. And the 3rd annual Wolverine Lacrosse Golf Classic is coming up next month. It's on Monday, July 21st at beautiful Harrison Meadows Country Club in Harrison, New York. So whether you're a Wolverine in the New York City area and ready to golf, or a fan or company who wants to support them with sponsorship, this is a great opportunity to contribute to the Michigan Men's Lacrosse Endowed Scholarship. You can check out the link, and it's going to be in the description for full details on timing, pricing, and registration. Support Michigan Men's Lacrosse on Monday, July the 21st at Harrison Meadows Country Club in the New York City area. And again, that link is going to be in the description, as well as some more details, so you can check it out there.
All right, number 5 on our 7 from 77. Ready for some math here, John?
Oh boy, math live on air is never my strong suit, but I'll do my best.
I'll give you a hint. It adds up to 16. It does feel like that's where we're heading. Much to my chagrin, I think 14 makes a heck of a lot more sense, especially when you've got a big 2 of conferences. But it seems like the 2 main models out there are the 5+11, 5 automatic qualifiers for the 5 highest ranked conference champions, and then 11 at-larges, or the 4+4+2+2+1+3. That rolls off the tongue. That would be
1, 3, 4, 16. Got it.
Yes, correct. You just got to love that. That would be 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten and the SEC, 2 for the Big 12 and the ACC, 1 for the next highest ranked conference champion, and then 3 at-larges with, I think it was the top 16 auto bid for Notre Dame if they're in the top 16, because
right.
Sure. It seems like from the reporting on this that the Big Ten is the biggest champion for we'll call it the arithmetic model, all the numbers, all the automatic bids, whereas ACC, Big 12, obviously on the side of we want more at-larges, even if maybe they might be preventing them from getting 2 bids. I think last year, if the 5+11 model were in, the Big 12 would have only gotten 1 team in.
Yeah.
But you're risking saying, hey, we're less than the Big 10 and the SEC, which isn't great from a branding standpoint. SEC hasn't come to a resolution. It was all over the discussion from their annual spring meetings. Where do you stand on the discussion of 5+11 versus all the other numbers?
I think it should be 5+11. I mean, earn your way in. And so I know the Big Ten is, if the schedules stay where they are now, and the SEC is only playing 8 conference games, and the Big Ten is obviously committed and full on board for 9 conference games, you're not comparing the same schedules. We've talked about how deep and how strong the Big Ten and the SEC are. So if you're exposing yourself to one more conference foe that is a really good conference foe instead of maybe a lesser Big 12 team or an FCS opponent, especially if you're going to schedule the Citadel before you play your rivalry game in November, then the auto bids are the way to go. I don't like the auto bids because I think you should be able to earn your way in. And in most years, those at-large bids, if you go with the arithmetic model, some of those may actually go to Big Ten and SEC teams. So it's a minimum of 4 each, but it could be 5 or even 6 from a conference. I don't particularly care for that either, but in the 5 plus 11, then it's the top 16 teams. And we'll debate 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Like that it's the same thing of debating 4, 5, and 6 when it was a 4 model. At 12, we're debating, who is and who should be in, as long as they keep the seeding the way it is right now and not auto seeding, but you get a chance to rank 1 through 16. 1 plays 16, 2 plays 15. That's how it should be. If you're the 1 seed, then you should have the right to play 16. And I don't know how they're going to do it, but to me, that just seems like the most logical model. But again, we're talking about the College Football Playoff Committee, the NCAA, and heads of conferences. Logic doesn't always play a factor.
What's interesting is that there has at least been some, I don't know if it's reporting or conjecture about it not being a straight 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, and having, in essence, like an NCAA tournament in basketball, first 4 who play, and then you still have the top 4 teams getting buys. That's why, to me, 14 makes so much more sense. You could do a 5 plus 9. You could have the top 2 conference champions get a bye, so that there's something from a playoff standpoint that is at stake in that game, in the Big Ten championship game, in the SEC championship game. And listen, Michigan side, it was a very special run that Michigan had last year in Indianapolis. And 20 minutes later, people were talking about UC San Diego. If you have these conference championships in the Big Ten and the SEC, which have become big money makers for these conferences, and immediately the conversation turns to, well, instead of being a 32-point favorite in the 1 versus 16 game, you are a 27-point favorite in the 2 versus 15 game. Right. Is that really enough? Is that worth the oomph of that? And from the Big Ten standpoint, is that worth a 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 in your league play-in game that would devalue, going back to our non-conference conversation, it would devalue those big non-conference games we want these teams to schedule?
Yeah, I mean, there's no perfect system, and I don't know what they end up doing. I do like the concept. If they're going to go 4-4, 2-2, 1-3. I think I got that right. I do like the idea of 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 play-in games. I think that is, I don't know what it is about that, but it just seems very entertaining to me. Because if you have the 1 versus 2, yes, you get a conference champion, but how much has the conference championship been devalued because those teams are going to be in the college football playoffs, may even play each other in the college football playoffs. It makes it murky on terms of who's going to win a conference, but it adds 2 more games to that, championship weekend that we're calling it now. And there's more on the line in regards to moving forward. So it's such a mess right now. I'm confused even talking about it because there are so many possibilities and so many wrinkles that I think they're devaluing the sport just by having the debate. Somebody needs to make a decision. Let's go with whatever it is. And I'm with you. I think 14, if you're going to expand it, go from 12, you go to 14. It's why we thought, hey, going from 4, go to 6 or 8, see what that feels like. Cause we know that they didn't like 12. They've already changed the model going to the straight seating. And now 2 years into it, they're going to scrap it all and go to the next one. There's no chance to see what the benefits are of a 12-team playoff, what the negatives are, versus all of a sudden jumping into a 16. We were at 4 teams for a decade. And I think at that point, yeah, you have the ability to see what are the positives, what are the negatives, and we can move forward. Because moving forward, like, I think college football it's changed more rapidly in the 5, 6, 7 years than it has in the history of college athletics. And I think moving forward, it's going to continue to do that. One of the factors, and I've mentioned this before, more guys playing longer at the college level because they're going to be making big time money versus a 4th round pick that you know, what type of money are you going to make as a 4th round pick versus if you are number 1 quarterback at Miami. Carson Beck is making more money this year than he would have as an undrafted quarterback or a late round pick like a Quinn Ewers or a Shedeur Sanders. Those guys going late in that NFL draft, everyone's looking at how much can I make in my 4th year if I stay another year, or my 5th year. Maybe I can be a little bit better. Maybe I can win a Heisman Trophy. Maybe I can up my draft stock. But in the meantime, I'm going to make $3, $4, $5 million.
I think there was a perfect system. I think it was 4. I think that was the perfect system because you had 2 games. Everything mattered. I like 12 more than I like 14 and 16 as well. I thought that at least kept everything in play to where buys mattered. You didn't have to go undefeated necessarily. That just, to your point, how long the BCS was almost 20 years, right?
Yeah. And so we lived with it. We knew that it had flaws, and we know moving forward, whether it's 14 or 16, or it's the 5+11 or the arithmetic model, like, there's going to be things that aren't perfect, but we've got to figure out what those things are before we tweak it and we move on. I like the tweak of the straight seating. I'm fine with that. I think it's a huge benefit. I think it's the way it should have been to begin with, but it's a tweak from year 1 to year 2. We could use more tweaks versus wholesale changes.
Got some great comments we'll react to here in a little bit on the video only portion here shortly. I do want to touch on a couple of things to wrap up 7 from 77. You've alluded to both. One, the imbalance of conference games. I do think that the 5+11 model might prevent the SEC from going to 9 games. I hope the Big Ten can leverage that and saying, hey, we will go with your side if you go to 9 games. Same for the ACC, even though it's not quite as consequential necessarily for them. They don't have as deep of a conference as the SEC or Big Ten.
Yeah, and it's going to come down to, does the Big Ten want to force the SEC to ultimately go to 9 games? What type of leverage are they willing to use? And how much leverage do they actually have in forcing the SEC to do that? How much does the SEC not want to go to 9 games? How much do they want to go to that 4-bid auto system or 5 and 11? It's really going to come down to, are you willing to play hardball, or are you just going to go for the money grab?
Yeah. And number 7, we all want more football, but you mentioned how many players are playing deep into their college careers, but also there could be a 17-game season for these teams if this plays out the way that it is currently structured. I think technically there might even be a slight chance of an 18-game schedule if they do that little play, and that would require like a 13 seed to go deep. We don't expect that necessarily, but it's a lot of football for anybody. I mean, the NFL 17 games, and you look at some of the active and inactive lists in week 8, and you go, boy, they're banged up.
Well, yeah, and this is on the heels. Now, I know rosters are a lot bigger, but you got guys that you're developing, guys that aren't going to get in games simply because they're just not ready yet. So how many on that 105, if that's the number we end with, are actually able to play on Saturdays? And then you start whittling down that list because of injuries. And, NFL teams, they have practice squads, they pick up free agents. There are a lot of different ways that they could complement their rosters, add to their rosters. They may not be great additions, but they're bodies. And at 105, if you've got a freshman class and of 25, but only 18 are playing, and that or 18 are not playing, and you got 7 that are playing, now all of a sudden you're looking at the rest of those. Some of those sophomores may not be ready to play. are they actually going to have 53 guys, which is an NFL roster, that are willing, able, and ready to play at the college level? It's for that many games. So I don't like playing that many games at this age. And some of it is, it's not that they can't handle it. They're 18 years old. They're adults. And a lot of them are physically able to. But when you start looking at length of career, now I know they're making money earlier. So it's again, more math on air. But if you're making money at the college level, how much does that limit? Because you have an expiration date. Everybody's body has an expiration date. Mine was 12 years into the league. We just saw Frank Ragnow. It was 7 years, right? As a Pro Bowl, all pro caliber player, how much shorter are those NFL careers going to be because you played at a school that went to the college football playoffs 3 out of the 4 years, and you ended up playing 15, 16, 17 games throughout the course of those three years. Plus, you played 12 as a freshman or one of those years. It's just it's too much. It's too much wear and tear. And I think the NFL will be the ultimate. They'll be the ones that suffer as well, because you're not going to have as many older veteran players reaching that point of their career.
Well said. All right. That's it for our 7 from 77. Transition time. On the audio side, great conversation Jon has with former Wolverine and now a reality star, Mel Owens. On the video side, Jon, give for those who are locked now we're locked in on the video side, and I want to get to some great comments and questions here about the CFP stuff. But the Mel Owens interview is awesome.
It is. It was so much fun. And so Mel Owens, for those that don't know, his brief resume, it's a great resume, but it's I'll just give you the Cliff Notes version. Played at the University of Michigan from 76 to 80, was a first round, number 9 overall pick to the LA Rams, had a great career over a decade, and went on to be a lawyer and is a workers' comp lawyer out in California. He is going to be the next Golden Bachelor. And so we cover his playing career, his career as a dad, as a coach, as an attorney, and obviously we dive into what's it mean, what's it like, and how did he get to be the Golden Bachelor at the very end. It was fun. There's some very funny moments in there, and it's going to be a very entertaining show. Brian, have you been a Bachelor fan, a watcher?
A while back, I watched maybe like 3-4 seasons of it. This is like a decade or so ago, and it was just one of those where you're kind of watching a car crash, but it's a funny car crash, and no one gets hurt except for emotionally occasionally. And I think
4 women in my house, I have not watched at great depth. I watched to basically make fun of the show and make dad comments. While the show was going on, hear the moans, the groans, go to a different room, Dad. This one's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be a little bit locked in on this because I know Mel, and I wish him the best. Hope he finds whatever it is he's looking for.
One teaser from the interview. Just wait till you hear some of the people who had to help him get the role.
Yeah.
Because boy, good on them for helping him get the role, because I feel like some of those same people might have, sabotaged a little bit. But hey, I never want to be a reality star. This is the
what are you talking about? Sports. You're sports broadcasters. It's the ultimate reality TV.
I'm not the star, though. Mel is the star.
You're Jesse Palmer.
We just get to detail it.
Right. Yeah. You're Jesse Palmer. That's what you are.
Oh, well.
You get to narrate. You tell the story.
Yeah. Okay. We want to get to some of these questions and thoughts in the comments here. Our guy Ferris Khan, who's been a loyal viewer over the years. This is a little more for me, with no conference title game, flexing a schedule at the end of the year. I think components to this are interesting. I think back to, remember the discussions around the BCS and how to fix it. I always thought the bowl plus one thing made sense, right? You keep Big Ten versus Pac-12 in the Rose Bowl. You keep the other tie-ins for these bowl games, and then you play out all those games, and then you play one more. You play a national championship based on the results of those games, because you get out of your conference bubble and you get a bowl game, you get the bowl experience, and then you play a national championship. The aspect I'll say to this is, if I'm the Big Ten, or the Big 12 in this case, the two power conferences that have 9 conference games in the regular season, I'd go to the championship week model. That gives you the 1 versus 2, 3 versus 6, or 4, however you want to do it, to put yourself in position to give your teams another marquee game, and then you let the 17th and 18th place teams play to send out their seniors and all of that.
I'm so confused.
I know.
It's so painful because college football it still is awesome, and game days are awesome. But having these conversations, whether it's conference expansion, it's NIL, it's transfer portal, it's college football playoffs, these are all exhausting. And it's just, you want to line up and play the games. You want to play against the best opponents possible to give yourself a chance to say, stack up against other historic great teams. That's one of the things that I love about the offseason when a national championship is finally crowned. How does that national champ stack up? Because we had these conversations. How does the last national championship team of Michigan stack up against the 97 team? And it's trying to compare apples to oranges because it's 2 different eras, 2 different styles of play. But those are the beautiful conversations. If you have a weak schedule and that's how you end up in a national championship game, and then you win over, a nail biter, like how do we even grade those teams and that year? Like it makes no sense. So part of what is great about college athletics is the history, the pageantry, the traditions. We're losing all of those. You already mentioned it. We may lose, USC Notre Dame. Like, I don't think we ultimately do. There's too much pressure because Notre Dame has said, yeah, we'll sign the contract. USC's been the holdout. There's a lot of pressure on USC to get that contract done. They will get it done. We will still have that game. But to your point, if they go to a joint schedule between the SEC and the Big Ten, now SC is going to play 9 conference games. They're going to play Notre Dame, and then they would have a crossover game with the SEC. That leaves 1 non-conference game for a cupcake, or like I call them preseason games.
And think about the travel for USC in that scenario, because you already have 4, maybe 5 conference games where you're traveling,
across the country.
At least 3 of them multiple time zones. The SEC's is Texas the closest geographical SEC team to USC?
Yeah.
And then you've got Notre Dame, where you have to go to South Bend, Indiana every other year. So I'm not as optimistic that contract's going to get signed. I'll be honest with you.
It really all depends on what happens with, is there going to be a crossover game between the Big Ten and the SEC? If that happens, then maybe we're saying goodbye to another great traditional game.
Keegan with a great point. A lot of football is about dominance. It won't be very interesting to see a top 4 team versus a lower ranked team. Agreed. The first round this past year was bad.
Terrible.
I think the one thing remember the last 2 years of the 4-team college football playoff were 4 of maybe the 5 or 6 best college football playoff games in the 4-team era. Michigan, TCU, Georgia, Ohio State in 22, and then Michigan, Alabama, Washington, Texas in 23. By that point, the momentum was already going toward the 12-team or an expanded playoff. I wonder if we would have had more of those types of close games, if it would have spread out a little bit more. Because I think it was 2016 where the 2 most lopsided lines in the postseason that year were the 2 playoff games. I think it was one of the Clemson Notre Dame years. Yeah. Like, there was literally every other bowl game was expected to be closer than the top 4.
It's bizarre. And now here's one thing that I do like about the 16-team playoff is you're going to have more of those top players playing in those games instead of opting out if they were in another bowl game. But it also may mean the end of the bowl system. So it's such a painful the business side of it is so painful right now. And all college football fans are just holding on. Just get us to week 0. Get us to week 1. Let us see some college football and put all this nonsense to bed, at least for 3.5 hours as you're watching your team play.
LW sharing. They are in Ohio. Everyone can't shut up about the Buckeyes not playing enough good night games. They hate Big Noon. Big Noon is great, man.
Big Noon is awesome. I
Preaching,
understand.
LW, like, spread the word.
Yeah, it is. Love Big Noon games because if you're playing in those games, first of all, it's going to be a premier game, most likely. And then you get a chance to be a college football fan after that. Watch the 3:30, watch the 8 o'clock game. And it's just, I love the Big Noon. I love what they're doing with that game and how much they are building it up. And I mean, we all know the state of Ohio, it's full with a bunch of whiners.
Jake, the original tribal chief. What's up, Jon and Brian? Acknowledge that. Michael, I expect more production from the tight end room this year in the pass game with a freshman quarterback or a transfer 5-year. A reliable tight end is their best friend. And I think there will be, I mean, Michigan has been, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I can't imagine there are many programs who have used more 2 or 3 tight end sets than Michigan has over the last handful of years. I do think there's a chance, and it might be a different tight end every game, which speaks to your confidence in the depth of that tight end room.
Well, I mean, the tight end is going to be a great, security blanket for either a freshman quarterback or a 5th-year guy who's new to the system. But I think you're going to see the tight ends used a lot more. I mean, Colston Loveland was underutilized last year just because they simply couldn't get the ball to him. So talent, arm strength, just the concept of the offense under Chip Lindsey will provide more opportunities for tight ends, more easy passes, the opportunity to go downfield, maybe even, let's just have an explosive play downfield would be nice. And tight ends, these guys, I mean, Marlon Klein, I asked without letting the cat out of the bag with Steve Casula, we've heard he's one of the fastest guys on the team. It's about time we see what that speed looks like. Let's get the ball in his hands going down the field and open this offense up.
I did want to make sure to present your homie Shuggles D. Do you know this person?
I don't. I'm guessing. I mean, I don't know anybody named Shuggles with the last name D. So I'm guessing it's a screen name.
Shuggles L.
Yeah. I do. Yeah. Shuggles L. Yes, but no. So, but if I do know you, I just don't know your screen name. What's up?
Big Noon ruined the Penn State whiteout game. It always used to be either Ohio State or Michigan. Now it is a lesser game. I don't totally disagree with that. I think that is a specific setting and circumstance that I'm with you there. Fox pays a ton of money, and they've got the top 3 picks, I think it is, in these drafts. So if Penn State and Michigan or Ohio State is expected to be a great game, I don't disagree with that concept. I don't think that's a reason why Big Noon is bad, but I think that's fair.
I do. I mean, that's one of the great scenes in college football is to be able to have that whiteout game in Happy Valley. Now, if you're a fan and you're going to that game, or if you're trying to get in and out, it's not fun. It's terrible. It's a terrible setup. But if you look at their schedule, right, they're hosted Oregon. That would be a nice one to have.
That's what's whiteout. That is the whiteout game. Yep.
That's a 7:30 game. You look at the rest of their schedule. I mean, they're on the road to Columbus. They host Nebraska, Indiana. Like, there's no really other great option. So I'm glad that they've at least made that Oregon game a whiteout and let Oregon experience that one.
Yeah. What you could do if you're Penn State, you could just make what you perceive to be your preferred whiteout game is your homecoming game. That's what you could do.
Yes.
Try to, just
I don't
circumvent the system a little bit.
Yeah. But who wants to see UCLA or Northwestern?
No. But I'm saying make the Ohio State game. Don't do the thing where you play your homecoming game against who you think will be your easiest home win. Just say we're going to make homecoming the Michigan or Ohio State game.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's a lot of different ways that they could go about this.
Yeah. Well, James Franklin will obviously provide the necessary insight and thoughts to fans as things goes along. All right. We want to talk about end of September records. So this will be quick hitting to wrap up the stream, but we have the schedules. We have some of the start times. So I just want to get your thoughts, what you think these Big Ten teams will have as their record at the end of September. So some with 4 games, some with 5. We'll do Michigan last because # production. Illinois a trendy playoff contender pick out there in college football. Not necessarily the most daunting non-conference, but at Duke is at least an intriguing game, one that they'll probably be favored. I know it's not Michigan, Oklahoma week 2. I get it. Your thoughts on what you see from where my eyes go is a really challenging start to conference play in Bloomington and at home against USC.
Yeah, but I think Indiana takes a step back. And I'm not going to sit here and say they're not going to be a good team. I think they're going to be just fine, but you're going to have a new quarterback. You're going to have a lot of moving parts. And I think this Illinois team with Brett Bielema, like we've been kind of waiting for this. And I think, 2 or 3 years ago, I was huge into Illinois. This is the year where I think they've got the offensive line, they've got the run game, they've got stability at quarterback, guy that's going to, has been there, has got some experience. And defensively, it's sneaky, one of the better defenses year in, year out. They've produced some great corners, some great defensive linemen. I think they're going to be aggressive. And going to Indiana for Illinois, I don't think that's going to be a tough game. The big question is, what's Lincoln Riley doing at USC? And we'll talk about their first their first September coming up. But hosting USC to round out September, I think it's an advantage to Illinois that it's going to be home. And I think they end up 5-0.
Interesting. October, they have back-to-back tough games, home against Ohio State, at Washington. If they can be sitting there in the playoff conversation come November, they finish home with Rutgers, home with Maryland, at Wisconsin, home with Northwestern. So the hay will be in the barn for their playoff positioning by the end of October. If they're in contention, they got to hold serve. If not, they're not going to be able to elevate much.
No, I agree.
Indiana. Not a gauntlet of non-conference play. They do get Illinois, who you said Illinois wins that game, and then at Iowa. So really, it's what, 3-1 going to Iowa. Is that fair?
Yeah, 3-1 going to Iowa, because I would expect them to beat ODU, Kennesaw State, Indiana State, and then I have them losing to Illinois, and then I actually have them losing going to Kinnick Stadium. So I think they start off this college football season 3-2.
Can you name the 3 nicknames of their non-conference foes?
ODU would be, I have no idea. Kennesaw State is, I don't know, the Jackrabbits.
That is South Dakota State, I believe.
Okay. And then Indiana State. I should know this with this one because I did an Indiana State game when I was with the Big Ten Network, but it is so inconsequential that it did not reserve a space in my memory, so I have no idea.
Okay, so 0 for 3. I will tell you one of the 3, and you tell me which one it is. Okay.
Yeah.
One of these is the Owls.
Kennesaw State.
Very good. Do you know which one? You're going to be mad at yourself when you hear the Indiana State one.
Is that the Sycamores?
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And then the Old Dominion, of course, the Monarchs.
Okay. Yes. Yes. I thought you were going to give me another one and just tell me to pick the one that was left.
Yeah. No. I should have just lied and said, oh, one of them is the Unicorns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Iowa. So you've got Iowa knocking off Indiana. Will that position them to be 5-0 at the end of September?
Yeah, I mean, they start with Albany, and I don't know that much about Iowa State, what they have coming back. I know Matt Campbell is a hell of a coach. That's one of the sneaky good games at the beginning of the schedule. That Cy-Hawk Trophy game is always good. I've been there one time. It was a lot of fun, but they beat up on Albany. They beat up on UMass. I think they ultimately beat Iowa State. Rutgers, I just don't know. I mean, they're always going to play a physical brand, but I think Iowa might be a 5-0 team coming out of September.
I'll go 4-1 with them. I just don't know what the loss will be because they could lose in Ames, they could lose in Piscataway, and they could lose at home to Indiana. I'll say they go 2-1 in those 3. Maryland, Florida Atlantic fighting former Dusty Mays, Northern Illinois, Towson, and at Wisconsin. It feels like Maryland's one of the least talked about teams in the Big Ten.
It is, and they're kind of always one of those teams. I know their schedule or their record didn't represent it last year, but they're always one of those teams that can jump up and bite you, and they'll be obviously ready for NIU for what NIU did to Notre Dame last year. I don't think Maryland can beat Wisconsin at Memorial Stadium there, so I'm going to say they are, 3-1? coming out of September?
Yeah, I think so. And they will probably still not be talked about very much at that point. Michigan State, I think it's a Friday night against Western Michigan to start. The matchup week 2 at home against Boston College, Youngstown State, and at USC. Your thoughts on the Spartans through September?
Well, I know what they need to do going into the Big Ten slate, but I think at best they're going to be 2-2. I don't think they beat Boston College, and I don't think they beat USC. So Western and Youngstown State, and I'm not sure that Western is going to be a given.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. Minnesota, will they ask the Bulls to row their way to Minneapolis from through the Great Lakes and all the way up? No,
they might just do that.
Yeah. A unique non-conference game at Cal, then home against Rutgers. What do the Fighting PJ Flex look like through September?
I think they probably come out 2-2. I think it's wins against Buffalo, Northwestern State, obviously, and then at Cal. I mean, traveling to Cal that's not an easy trip. And I know Cal had a couple of games that they should have won last year. They've got a lot of guys coming back. And I don't know that even though they're hosting Rutgers, I'm not a huge Schiano fan, but I do know that his teams will be disciplined. They will be aggressive, and they're gonna play a physical brand of football. So I think Minnesota is probably 2-2 coming out of September.
Interesting. Nebraska, they open with a neutral site game in Indianapolis against Cincinnati. Couple of bye games at home before the matchup with Michigan. I know where you're going to go with that one, but will they be undefeated when Michigan comes to town?
I think they will because of Raiola at that quarterback position. And so it's not Akron or Houston Christian. I don't know how they get on the schedule. But Cincinnati, I just don't think they're not the team that they were, obviously, with Luke Fickell there. Neutral site. I think Raiola comes out and shows why he was such a high recruit. He had a good freshman year, tapered off a little bit at the end, but this is a team that I think is probably 3-0 going into that Michigan game.
I had to look this one up. Any guesses on Houston Christian's nickname?
The Fighting Jesuses.
Nailed it. Northwestern. No.
I don't know. I mean, come on. Houston Christian, that's at least a good guess.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, fighting with the apostrophe at the end. There's no second G there in fighting.
Yeah, right.
Huskies. So
the Huskies, that's close.
You're right there. Yeah, both can walk on water, maybe. Northwestern at Tulane, home against Western Illinois, and then they play a couple of former Pac-12 teams. Trying to recalibrate here after that one, John. What do you think? 2-2 there?
Yeah, I think 2-2. I think they lose both Big Ten games, but Tulane, Western Illinois. I think the only question is how do they travel down to Tulane? The Green Wave, do know that one, but I think there's probably 2-2 coming out of September.
Ohio State, the matchup with Texas in week 1. I'm fascinated by that last one at Washington. So this is a really interesting September schedule to me for the Buckeyes. What say you?
I think they lose to Texas. I think Texas just has too much coming back, too much consistency. They're going to have the better quarterback. And a lot of it is we just don't know if Julian Saban is their quarterback in Columbus. Nobody's really seen him. We don't know what he's good at, what he doesn't do well. And maybe that's to their advantage going into that Texas game. But I think it's just too much speed, too much explosive power. And I think Arch Manning launches his 2025 Heisman campaign against Ohio State.
Oregon, they get Montana State. We talked about that week 2 network TV matchup against Oklahoma State. At Northwestern, former rivalry with Oregon State, and then at Penn State. A lot of interesting matchups here for Oregon. Obviously replacing a great deal like Ohio State, like Texas from deep runs last year.
I think that they're 4-1 coming out of September. And I think that one is Penn State. Going to Penn State, that whiteout, it is, I know that they're always going to be talented, but they're going to be, breaking in a new quarterback as well. Dylan Gabriel's in Cleveland. So we'll see what Dan Lanning has. But I do think that they dropped that one. Penn State, as much as I don't like James Franklin, I'm not going to hold it against his athletes. And with Drew Aller coming back, it's really going to be dependent on his play and his leadership of that team. They're going to be talented. We know that. And I think with Aller, Allen, Singleton, their duo in the backfield, we've been talking about those guys, seems like forever now. And I just think there's going to be too many explosive plays for Oregon to keep up with.
I can see an outcome where Penn State and their next tier, which with you saying they're going to beat Oregon, there'll be 4-0 then through September based on what they play before that. But there's an outcome where, James Franklin is his approval rating in Happy Valley is as low as it's been, and Drew Aller doesn't really get drafted all that high. I think there's an outcome where Penn State could win the national championship and Drew Aller could be the number one pick. Not saying that is likely, but that is in the range of outcomes for me for Penn State, especially if they start with that win over Oregon.
I'd agree with that. I mean, it's that all of that is on the table for him, and it's really going to come down to Drew Aller. Again, what is he doing this offseason to improve the big moments? We've seen him be very good at times, but in some of the big moments, he's come up small. What's he doing to mentally prepare, physically prepare for his last year in Happy Valley?
And let me specify, I'm not going to predict that Penn State will win the national championship. I will have to believe it until I see it, and then probably have to see a replay. Mm-hmm. Purdue, your thoughts on probably the most rebuilding, the most probably the favorite for 18th in the Big Ten?
Yeah, and so Barry Odom, their new coach, he's brought in some transfers. It'll be interesting to see what he does at the quarterback position, because I know he inherited a sophomore. I forget his name, but he did bring in from Arkansas, Malachi Singleton. So what we know about him is he's one of those dual threat quarterbacks. He's very good on his feet. They're going to utilize him in the run game. They lost a couple of guys up front on that offensive line, so he may have to utilize that elusiveness by extending plays, getting outside the pocket. Barry Odom's a good coach. So when I look at this start to the season, I mean, what is even a good start to the season? Is it 2-2? That would be. I think
it's really the win-loss don't really matter here, because they'll be expected to beat Ball State and Southern Illinois. It's a matter of, can you keep the USC and Notre Dame game somewhat close for a while? I feel like that's the barometer, don't you?
Yeah, I do, and I just have major questions about USC and what they're going to be. I'm not going to say that they're going to lose to Purdue, but I think that game might be a little bit better than most people thought.
Well, the job Barry Odom did at UNLV. UNLV has really never been good at football. You have to go back to the 70s for when they were actually good. He did a great job there in 2 years. I'll be curious what he can do at Purdue. With all accounts, the resources there are maybe more tilted to basketball maybe than any other place in the Big Ten right now. Rutgers, you mentioned them as a team that could get some teams. Where do they stand after a couple of really interesting ones to end the month of September?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. Ohio, that's a win. Miami of Ohio, that's a win. Norfolk State, that's a win. And that's where I was looking at Iowa going, okay, I think if I said Iowa was 5-0, that means they beat Iowa, or I mean they beat Rutgers and Minnesota. I'm going to say they might be a team that's 5-0 coming out of September. I don't know that anybody's talking about them at that point, but they could be that team that is, undefeated going into October.
You do realize we are live on the air, correct?
Okay, so you think they're losing at Minnesota?
I think they'll be 4-1.
But well, now call your shot. Which one do they lose?
I'll say they lose to Iowa at home.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't count out those two MAC championship participants from last year in the first 2 weeks. That's all I'm saying. UCLA. Obviously the West Coast flavor here. They get Michigan's week 1 opponent for their third game. UCLA is kind of an afterthought on the football side compared to the other 3 teams that were added out west. Can they make some noise?
They can. They might be able to get a couple of wins in UNLV and New Mexico, but I think they're going to be hard pressed going to Evanston and getting a win at Northwestern. I don't think Northwestern is going to be great, but I think they're good enough to beat UCLA, and I know Utah is going to probably put a smackdown on them. So I think you're probably looking at 2-2 at best.
This is the one that's been interesting because you've mentioned USC and your concerns several times. What do you think their record is at the end of September?
I don't know what they're going to do at that quarterback position because they've got Meijer, who's a transfer. They've got Sam Heward, who was a transfer, and he may be the best of the bunch. I just don't know. And Hussein Longstreet is a highly regarded freshman, but he's a freshman, and they're going to have to protect him. They're going to have to play a different brand of football than they're used to. They're not used to playing physical up front. And they really got a rude introduction to the Big Ten last year. So when I look at this, okay, let's just go game by game. Missouri State win, Georgia Southern win, at Purdue win, Michigan State probably a win, at Illinois a loss. So I'm going to say 4-1 coming out of September.
We'll keep tabs on your USC thoughts because it's an interesting one because obviously Michigan goes there October 11th, which will be and that's still a big brand. I expect Michigan to be favored in that game, but obviously the September results will play a big factor. Washington, a team that always felt like a year two potential build for Jed Fish and company there. They were able to hang tough in some games. They had a brutal schedule last year. How do they shape up, including that Ohio State matchup at the end of the month?
I think they come out of this 2-2. They beat UC Davis, Washington State, Colorado State, sneaky tough. And I know they're hosting, that first week. I mean, 3-1 would obviously be the best that they could do. I don't think they beat Ohio State. But that Colorado State game, I'm not sold that in year two they're ready to take on, that program early on.
Interesting. Lastly, before we get to Michigan, Wisconsin at Alabama. That's a continuation of that series. This feels like 3-1.
Yeah, a 3-1 with that loss to Alabama. And again, Wisconsin last year they were ravaged by injury. That Maryland game, Maryland's always going to be a little sneaky. I don't think they go to Memorial Stadium, as I mentioned before, and get a win. So I do think that they will probably be 3-1 coming out of September, but I'm not sure how confident anybody is in that 3-1.
What do you think Luke Fickell has to do to hold on to his job?
8-4. I would think 7-5, depending on
how it looks.
Yeah. This might be one of those years where, hey, as long as 7-5 looks good, they'll get another year.
Yeah. Michigan. I include lines that are already out from DraftKings there. Obviously, Michigan and the number is what the team is getting or not getting. So Michigan is a 34.5 point favorite against New Mexico, as you'd expect. The CMU line is not up, but Michigan is an underdog, 1.5 at Oklahoma, and just a slight 3-point favorite at Nebraska, though that did open 2.5 and has gone up a little bit for those who are betting advanced lines on college football games 3 months in advance. For them, congrats on that. But interesting to say that Vegas believes, in essence, that Michigan will be a 3-1 football team going into the month of October. What game are you more worried about, Oklahoma or Nebraska?
That's a tough question because Oklahoma, for a couple of years now, since Brent Venables has been there, just simply hasn't been Oklahoma. I know he's calling the defense this year. The defense is going to be good, and it's going to be challenging. If it's Bryce Underwood as a quarterback, it's his first time on the road in a very hostile environment. I think he's up to it. If it's Mikey Keene, who's the quarterback, like he's been in hostile environments before, he'll be very composed. I'm not worried about it. I think they come out with a win at Oklahoma. And so I'm probably more worried about that trip to Nebraska. And so I'm going to go with the safe route and say 3-1. And I don't know if that one is Oklahoma or Nebraska, but I do think that they drop one of those.
Interesting. I'm surprised because
you thought I would just be 4-0, 12-0.
No, honestly, of course. You've picked Michigan to win every game since back in your 3-year-old John Jansen Clausen Michigan days, getting ready, and you accidentally stumbled and said the wrong word. I'm more nervous about Oklahoma, and it's because that feels like the game of potential, like the fork in the road for Brent Venables at Oklahoma. So what I'd love to see, obviously, in that game is for Michigan to get off to a good start, because then it could get really uneasy there. Because if Michigan goes to Oklahoma and wins with a former Sooner leading Michigan in here with Venables not having any success there, that has a chance to be the beginning of the end for him there. Nebraska, I don't really feel that necessarily the same for. If Michigan is 3-1 through the month of September, I'd prefer them to beat Nebraska because it's better in the Big Ten.
Big Ten, yeah. I would agree. And it's so you know, and every player here, every coach here should be very well aware that this is the game for Brent Venables. And it's the start of the season for Brent Venables. And they're going to get their best shot. You're going to get the player's best shot. You're going to get his best coaching job that he could possibly do. But I just look at, and I think by that time, we've got Andrew Babalola at left tackle. Evan Link bumps down to one of the guard spots. Giovanni Alhadi, Greg Crippen, Andrew Sprague. They go ahead and they crank up that diesel, that 18-wheeler. They got both smokestacks rolling downhill, and they road grade them, allowing Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall to take over this game early, often. And I'm looking at about a 250 to 300-yard rushing event.
And that means, based on your prediction, you picked Michigan to lose 2 weeks later. The hell's wrong with you, John? Where are the smokestacks? Where are the crying children?
We still have some young players. It's going to be a roller coaster of the season. Let's regain our composure. I'm not saying they can't be 4-0. I think coming out of those 4 games, though, it's most likely 3-1, which will set them up for a great run in this schedule in the Big Ten.
Well, on that note, there's Burks sharing John Jansen, Michigan legend, and GOAT. So send that to your former teammate, Tom.
What's that?
Send
celebrating
the GOAT there.
The GOAT. Yeah.
Although it's not all capitalized, so he might just be calling you the animal.
I'm a little goat. I'm a kid.
For the little goat, I'm Brian Bush. It's been a pleasure. We will be back in 2 weeks with another stream. We mentioned for those who are subscribed to the podcast, be sure to check out the Mel Owens interview. It's great. Next week, audio only with Steve Casula. Any final thoughts, Mr. GOAT?
No, just get ready for a wild ride. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun, and I just can't wait for it to get here.
Less than 3 months away from under the lights at the Big House,
New Mexico. Woohoo!
That's the spirit. For John, I'm Brian. We'll talk to you all in a couple weeks.